Welcome to Ressa's Take. I'm so glad you're here. Each week, we will tackle some common challenges that we all often experience in life, and I'll share my take on the topic, along with some of my learnings from my own experiences. This is all about navigating life together and unlocking our best selves, one conversation at a time. Hello, everybody. It's your girl, Ressa. Welcome to season 2 of Ressa's Take. I know that it's been a few months since you last heard from me. I am really glad, though, that I took some time to listen to my body and give myself a break and, launching the podcast, curating episodes, doing all of the editing myself, all of the social media kind of stuff, even though I didn't do a ton, but, putting all of that together. It took a lot of time and it took brain power and a lot more than I thought that it would. And over the last several months, I've really realized exactly how much I have been overworking myself for so long, beyond just this year. And I really needed to give myself a break. And I'm glad that I listened to myself and that I took some time away from Rest's Take to allow me to have my weekends back and just recharge and enjoy my summer. Now, all that said, I'm back and I'm looking forward to the second season. I already have a few topics lined up just based on things I've experienced during this break. And I guess that's the value of taking a break. Your brain fog gets lifted and you have a little bit more space to think. Now, that said, I had an entirely different vision for what I thought I would kick this season off with. My plan was to pick a more upbeat topic and get things started on a fun and uplifting note. But just a few weeks ago, my father passed away, and I've been navigating some really complicated feelings that have been challenging for me to put into words. Grief is a really complex thing. And those that care about you mean well when they ask you, like, hey, how are you doing? I'm just checking in. But I never really know how to answer that, honestly. And I'm obviously not okay. But I've had a hard time processing what it is that I'm actually feeling because me and my dad's relationship was estranged for most of my life. So that said, today's topic is not the upbeat vibe that I was aiming for, but it is something that I felt like I really should cover on the podcast. I actually recorded the episode that you're about to listen to about a week and a half after he passed. And I recorded it as an outlet for me just to get my feelings out, feelings that had just been hard to express. And it was like a way of talking to myself and getting my thoughts and feelings out. And for those of you that are creatives, we all have our outlets. There are some people that to get their feelings out, they'll paint or they'll draw, or others will dance. And podcast is not the typical creative outlet, but for me, it's a way for me to express how I'm feeling. So yes, I recorded a podcast, a week and a half after my father passed, but it's not because it was light or because it's content, not at all. It honestly is just a way of me being able to put my feelings into a format that I'm familiar with and quickly turn it around in a way that I know that by me navigating what I'm feeling, I could be helping others. Um, so if it feels weird that I recorded a podcast shortly after he passed, just know that that's the reason. It has nothing to do with content. I can just imagine that there are probably so many others that might be able to relate to what I'm feeling and have dealt with or may currently be dealing with grief of an estranged loved one. And I don't actually think that's something that's really talked about often. Usually, when you hear about grief, it's people that you were really close to, you spent so much time with, you had an amazing relationship with. And what happens when that's not the case? And that's the point of Ressa's Take. We talk about the real stuff and the hard stuff. So, my plan was just to keep the recording saved and then post it at some point this season. But I've actually decided to start with this topic because it's the vulnerable state that I am currently in at this moment. So why not just go there? So let's go ahead and play the episode. Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in today. Today's topic is a bit more somber than usual. I recently lost my father. He passed away on October 19th. And for those of you that have been following Ressa's take since the beginning, you've heard me talk a bit about my complicated relationship with him in some of the earlier episodes during season one. And for those of you that may be new here, my dad and I had a complicated history and relationship. We went a decade, literally, or maybe a little bit more than a decade without talking. And we both exchanged some harsh words with each other before that happened. And I ultimately felt like God was nudging me to reconcile with my dad as I was about to graduate from undergrad. It took me a while, but after I kept feeling nudges in my heart, I decided to just follow what I felt God was telling me and reach out to my dad. And I'm glad that I did. When me and my dad had the chance to revisit our relationship, I was 25 at the time. And things weren't perfect from there, but it was the start of the path to healing. He and I kept in touch like briefly over the years, but I just had to accept the fact that our relationship would never grow into what I had always hoped it would be. But that said, I was grateful for what we had. So if we fast forward to October 20th of this year, my brother had let me know that our dad had passed away. And navigating what I'm feeling during this time has been really complicated. I'm recording this episode partly for my own healing and partly because I'm sure there are others that have experienced or are currently experiencing something similar. Whether it's a parent, sibling, child, friend, having an estranged or a strained relationship with someone and then them ultimately passing is a really rocky road to navigate. You're not sure what to feel. You could choose to act like you feel nothing, but we all know that's not true. You are feeling something. It could be sadness, it might be anger, it could be confusion, but you're definitely feeling something. And denying it only prolongs your healing process. So we just have to stop lying to ourselves. And you might not be sure what you're feeling. And that is a very reasonable reaction. That's currently where I am. You have feelings, but you can't really name them because you're likely feeling a lot at once. And I think this is likely normal for anyone grieving. So I would definitely expect it to be the case when the relationship itself was complicated. I don't know, y'all. Grief is complicated. And for estranged relationships, it comes twofold. You're grieving the loss, and then you're also grieving what could have been. I read an article on this topic just as I was trying to help myself from Crown of Hope Counseling. And there's an excerpt from the article that I want to read that I felt captures this situation well. The state of your relationship with your lost loved one doesn't make them any less loved, nor does it make your grief or your lack of grief invalid. It means that all of that love you had for that person before your relationship became tense or void just never found somewhere to go. It just got buried deep for the sake of moving on. And now that your loved one has passed, that unresolved love has resurfaced, asking for somewhere, anywhere to be placed. So, where does it go now? How do you move on from here? While nursing emotions like resentment, trauma, love, pain, and remorse, and often all at once. Let me tell you, reading that made me feel seen. And as I'm recording this, it's only been a little less than 2 weeks since my dad's passed. And I'm still on bereavement from work. And I even felt guilty taking that. I'm taking time off to grieve a father that I barely knew. The last time that I really felt I knew him was when I was 14, before I actually cut him out of my life. And I did that at the time because it was what I felt needed to be done at that point. I don't expect anyone from the outside looking in to really understand why I made that choice. He and I know the depth of what led to me making that decision to just let him go. Our relationship was broken way before that, though. Toxic, even. We were constantly on different pages. He would argue with me more than we would talk. But that was the last time that I had a semblance of a relationship with him, which was when I was 14. Now, fast forward, I'm 37 now, and I've talked to him only a handful of times each year since we reconciled when I was 25. I didn't really know him, but I miss him. I cry with no real memories to reflect on, other than a few from when I was a little kid. And please know, I say none of this with ill will towards him. He and I reconciled. I eventually forgave him, and he knows that. And everything that I have said on this podcast before and now, I have said to his face. We have had these tough conversations, and we got through it. I'm not trying to speak ill of my late father. I'm just sharing my honest feelings and the reality of our relationship, which is what makes grieving him even more complicated for me. Grieving an estranged loved one, it's difficult. And if you have or are experiencing this, just know that if you feel like no one else can relate to what you're feeling, I can. And I am fortunate that me and my dad had the opportunity to reconcile and put the past behind us and to find out what the future of our relationship looked like before he passed away. But if you didn't have that opportunity to reconcile before your loved one passed away, or you did have the opportunity, but you chose not to, don't beat yourself up about that. That's not productive and that's not going to help you heal. It'll actually do the opposite. Just accept that you had your reasons for keeping your distance and just work on sorting through your feelings that you're experiencing now. Some of the emotional challenges I'm facing are thinking about the things that could have been and the things that will never be. He'll never see me get married. He'll never meet his grandkids if I'm blessed to have children someday. He will never see or hear about any of my future successes that he really would have been proud of. I didn't even get to tell him that I got promoted and I'm a vice president now. It's a big milestone for me, but I didn't even get to let him know because it happened shortly before he passed. My dad had several strokes over the past few years, which slowly deteriorated his quality of life. And regardless of how I may feel navigating grief, I am happy that he's now at peace. That is one thing that helps me cope with what I'm feeling. It's just a lot of feelings to navigate. Those that are close to me know that while I'm very much a really emotional person, I actually have a hard time talking about my feelings. So I just want to thank y'all for allowing me to have this outlet and get this out. And I genuinely hope that if nothing else, it resonates with someone, even one person that may have experienced something similar so that they can know that they're not alone. Closure is something that is also complicated in a situation like this. If you're grieving the loss of an estranged loved one, you likely are feeling the need for multiple forms of closure. You may be missing closure from whatever falling out you may have had with your loved one, closure to feel like you both felt heard and understood, and closure regarding their passing. My dad had expressed that he didn't want to have any services for his death, which we respected. So we did not hold any services for him. Man, that's been hard for me. It's like my life went on as if nothing changed, but something massive changed. But because it's not like we spoke often and we only saw each other maybe once a year, my day to day hasn't changed. But there's going to come a day, a few months from now, a year from now, or whenever it is, that it will feel different. I wanted to celebrate his life, and I wanted that very clear moment in time in my memory to take place so that it was very clearly closure. But he didn't want a service, so of course we will respect that. It's not about me in this moment, nor should it be. But it just makes it all a little harder to get through. If you have or are going through the loss of an estranged loved one, you likely already grieved them once when the relationship fell apart. And now you're navigating grieving them again as they've passed. These are really heavy feelings. So just be kind to yourself during this time. Don't rush your healing. And remember, just because you can't name how you feel right now doesn't mean that you don't feel anything. You're likely feeling so many things at once. Give yourself both the space and the grace to navigate, name, and heal from everything that you're feeling. All right, y'all. I know that before we wrap up, I usually like to talk through recipes for how to tackle the episode's topic, but I'm in the thick of navigating all of this. So I'm just going to share a few reflections before we wrap up. My first reflection is allow yourself to grieve. Even if you don't know what you're feeling exactly, don't dismiss it, don't rush it, don't breeze past it. Regardless of how complex the relationship was, how long you've been estranged, you're going to need time to heal and you need to give yourself that time, however long it takes. My next reflection is ignore criticism. Anyone that hasn't experienced it for themselves will not be able to understand. So don't let anyone belittle your feelings or your lack of feelings if that's the case. No one can tell you what you're feeling, and no one can tell you how to feel. And put them in their place, honestly, if you have to. People like that just need to mind their business. They don't know what's in your heart. They don't know what went down between you and that person. And they can only speak on their own experience. They can't speak on yours. So ignore them and shut them down if you need to. If they aren't offering help, comfort, support, and they're only there to make it more complicated, check them. No one can tell you what you should or shouldn't feel. And lastly, accept help when you're ready. This is deep stuff. It's complicated. And you may have people in your life that you love and people that want to help you, want to comfort you. And when you're ready, let them. And go to therapy if you need to. But whatever you do, don't suppress how you feel. Suppressed feelings always rise to the surface one way or another. And it's better to work through it now, in the moment, rather than years from now and navigating life silently hurt and grieving until then. Okay, that's all I have for today's episode. I really want to thank you all for listening. If you made it to the end of this episode, thank you. And even if no one is listening right now, if this is too sad for you, this was a really helpful outlet for me. It's a really hard thing for me to talk about, but it felt therapeutic to say some of these feelings out loud. If you went through or are going through something similar, I just want you to know you're not alone. And I hope that today's episode was relatable and helped you in some way. Thank you again for tuning in. I look forward to chatting with you all next time. I hope you have a great weekend. God bless. And that's a wrap. Another candid chat among friends. If today's episode resonated with you, hit that follow button, share the episode with your friends, and leave a review. I would love to hear what resonated most and love to hear any of the thoughts that you have on the episode. Hope to see you soon, and don't forget to drop your questions or insights on our Instagram at Ressa's Take.